passion that each of these women have. And so now they're going to cross-examine each other, 3 to 5 questions. And since you won the coin toss, we'll allow you to ask the first question.
Are we on now? View human life when human life begins. Is it a creator? Is it not? But my question is for you is, if we shouldn't legislate when human life begins, when would you say that? Well, I guess when would you say life begins and human rights attached to a person?
Well, can you hear me? Okay. I think that that's something that varies, that not everyone agrees that life begins at fertilization. I think that there's potential. Fertilized eggs don't always implant. Babies are miscarried. There's potential there, but it doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily end up in a born, fully formed human being. And my answer to that is, why does a woman have to lose her rights because there's an embryo forming inside of her? Why do her rights suddenly become subservient to that embryo? And why does she not get a say on what happens with her own body? I mean, that's one thing. And then I also want to point out that if we legally define life and all of the rights assigned to fully formed, walking, breathing human beings, assigned to that embryo, that blastocyst, we're also jeopardizing our right to contraception. We're jeopardizing a lot of reproductive technologies. Many people use in vitro fertilization when they have problems conceiving, and this would jeopardize those technologies as well. And I think it's a very slippery slope if we assign legal rights to an embryo. I think anyone in their own lives and in their own religion should be able to make that, to look into their own conscience and decide whether or not they believe that life begins at conception, and then follow that in their own lives. But not everyone agrees on that point, and for that I don't think that it would be appropriate to assign legal rights.
And then I would think that you really, I think, hit on kind of the heart of this question. When does life begin, and what is the role of government? And when I was listening to you, I heard you say that life begins at fertilization. And so that means then that there would be a government interest in protecting that life at fertilization.
Yes.
So then we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? Does that mean it will be a state jail felony if a woman is not taking proper prenatal vitamins, or if she falls? And are there tort rights associated at fertilization? There's a whole host of questions that come along with that. But at the same time, to say that there is no role, I mean, can we justify, or are we comfortable justifying abortion at 8 months or at the day before delivery? I think that is just the very heart of the issue, and it's just a very complicated question, and I'm really glad that that's what you focus on, because I think that is really where everyone tends to decide where they are on this issue, is by addressing and thinking about that very question.
I think I agree that everyone takes not only the question of when does life begin, but at what point is that life sufficient for us to be attaching rights and legal rights, like you said. And so I think more so the argument of where do we draw the line is where people draw their own line.
Are we going back and forth with questions, or?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, well, following up on what Representative Davis was asking, I'm interested to hear, Emily, what your viewpoint is if, as you argue that life begins at fertilization and human rights are assigned at that point, what should be the penalty? Should women who miscarry be criminally investigated? And what should be the penalty for women who self-induce abortion?
Absolutely not. The problem that we have with not saying as a society, as a government, the problem that we have is with the state saying abortion is legal, that it is permissible to kill the unborn child. I'm not under a cloud of naivety to think that if abortion was illegal, that there would be no abortions. But I think it speaks for us as how we go as a country on whether abortion is legal or not legal. So I think that pretty much I wouldn't assign criminal penalties or anything, but I don't really know all the intricacies of that. Not practicing attorney yet, so not sure.
Yes.
Yes, operative word. Yeah.
And that's the question that we were really talking about, and I appreciate that you recognize that women women have been inducing abortion since the time when they figured out how to do it, and that making it illegal or penalizing isn't actually going to stop women from doing it. So I do appreciate that you recognize that, but also understand that you have a real problem with the government not being involved in it, because from my understanding correctly, then your perspective is by the government allowing abortions to take place, it is inherently sanctioning the activity.
Yes.
I want to make sure that I am articulating everybody's position correctly. So now you can ask.
Okay. Heather, I was wondering, on the heels of HB2 and all that drama, are there any kind of abortion clinic regulations, abortion doctor position regulations that inform consent for the woman? Are there what restrictions, if any, would NARAL support?
So that's a good question, and actually kind of leads into what I was going to ask you next. I don't believe that by the government allowing for legal abortion, that it's necessarily sanctioning it from a moral standpoint. I think it's a matter of being able to control the industry, and I think, obviously you're very right, and I agree with you that, making abortion illegal is not going to make it stop. We only have to look at history to see what happens when that occurs. I feel that by creating restrictions that the effect will be to close down clinics, creating laws that make it impossible for safe, legal clinics to operate, creates the space for the kind of nefarious providers we saw prior to 1973. Frankly, providers like Kermit Gosnell, who was not operating within the law. I think it's important that we have clinics that are available so that women have that accessibility when they need it, and that it is regulated by the government. And Texas has done a great job of doing that. There was actually a report that came out today. I've actually got a copy of it right here. It's dated June 28th of 2013, and it's the Texas Health and Human Services Commission report to the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and it goes through the regulations that the state has done, and has the thing that's most informative about this report is that it demonstrates that there isn't a problem with rogue providers in the state. The state has done a good job of monitoring and policing abortion providers and ensuring that these clinics are safe, that they are operating within the law, and that they are regulated. Clinics are inspected quite frequently, usually surprise inspections. They have a mountain of paperwork and reporting that they're supposed to do. And if we make it illegal, if we have them all shut down, and then we have, the guy at the flea market selling pills, God knows what, to women saying that they'll induce an abortion, that's not something we're creating a black market and underground industry, and that's where the danger comes in, which is where I think that at that point the government is actually sanctioning illegal abortion.
I would like to just clarify, I think maybe I misspoke earlier. While I do think that if abortion was made illegal, there would be, there still, might be some illegal abortions. I do think that as we as a society, we grow up believing that what is legal is right. So I do think that, the abortion rate would drastically decrease, the raw numbers would decrease if abortion was illegal. And second of all, I have a hard time coming to grips with the back alley abortions, or regressing back to pre-Roe v. Wade times. I mean, regardless of what, I mean, Roe v. Wade, I guess, is, regardless of that, we are so far more medical knowledge. I know we have some OB-GYNs in the room, that I don't think that if abortion is illegal, that we're going to automatically revert back to back alley abortions. If there's going to be illegal abortions take place, there's doctors, we're not going to lose, they're not going to lose that knowledge. So I don't think that it's really fair to say we would resort back to back alley abortions at that time. It'd be sad, but I don't think that would actually happen.
So I'm going to ask a question that I get asked whenever I appear on panels with state legislators. Everyone always asks me, is there any common ground between the positions? And I have my answer, but I would love to hear if you, and then I'd love to hear what your answers to that question.
Sure. Well, you know, I think it is possible to have common ground. I think that if we are able to have dialogues like this, and we're not shouting, you know, talking points and rhetoric back and forth, there's certainly room for common ground. In the introduction of Emily, I actually heard some common ground, and that, you know, you started a scholarship fund for pregnant and parenting students so they could complete their education, and those types of real assistance are what I think, you know, really makes you pro-life, and not so much in opposition to abortion. You're actually supporting someone in their life. And when I hear of some of the pregnancy crisis centers that, you know, just focus only on dissuading someone to have abortion, you know, having talked to many women who are pregnant and are making that decision because they can't afford another child, you know, I think that there has to be a way to support women in a more holistic way, so that, you know, they're making a choice truly because they want to make it, not because they feel they have no other alternative. And that's another lesson that I've learned on the abortion funding hotline, is that many women feel that their only alternative is abortion. And offering them the true resources by having a society that supports them in all of their choices is important, and I think that that is an area where we can have some common ground.
I definitely agree about the Parenting and Pregnant Student Scholarship Program, if I could just make a plug for that for a second. At Stephen F. Austin, we started a scholarship fund that was solely based off of donations, fundraisers that the pro-life organization brought, and that we, you know, give out a couple $1,000s a year to either pregnant moms or parenting. We've given for fathers too. But that scholarship program has spread to Texas A&M, which we have 2 former presidents of Aggies, almost said Longhorns, Aggies for Life with us tonight, and they were both instrumental on growing that scholarship program. And there's a few other schools, Texas universities, that are in the process of establishing that pregnant and parenting student scholarship on their campus. So it is really good. I just would like to, you know, I think Ms. Busby characterized pregnancy resource centers a little differently. You know, a lot of the pregnancy resource centers, for instance, the one here, the Source for Women in Houston, they do STD testing and all kinds of other, you know, holistic women's health issues, and even the ones that aren't as well funded. The one I volunteered at, we had baby showers for these women who, it wasn't just about dissuading people from abortion. We were helping them get through the underlying reasons as to why they were seeking abortion. Was it financial help? Was it college plans? Was it a parent they were afraid of? We had counselors from the university, counselors licensed counselors that would work with these girls to figure out, you know, no one wakes up one day saying, I want to have an abortion. There's underlying reasons, and those are the reasons that we need to help.
Okay, well, I would like to thank both of you for doing an excellent job on tackling a very complex issue in a very civil manner, and I would like to thank everyone here for listening and not shouting. And I think at this time we're going to take some questions if anybody has questions in the audience.
Right, we're going to do probably 20-30 minutes of Q&A from the audience, so if you have a question, if you want to try to walk on up if you can, and we'll try to form a line right now. Paul's going to have the first question because he's first in line.
Right here.
Right, exactly.
I'm the closest.
Choice.
I have a question for Heather. Heather, is there a date during gestation after which you would be willing to bar an abortion, including, say, a failed abortion post-birth? And if so, what would be your justification for allowing that ban?
Sorry, can you clarify, you said failed abortion post-birth? What did you mean by that?
When the child is born doing a failed abortion and the baby actually emerges alive.
You know, current law of abortion in Texas is restricted after viability, after the 24th week. And I think that, you know, that legal limit is something that is I'm perfectly fine with. I think once a fetus is viable, you know, if you go back to kind of the home invasion analogy, once that home invader can actually, you know, leave and be fine on their own, then that's okay. You know, there used to be the trimester framework, and I'm okay with 24 weeks viability being the framework.
Well, just to follow up, how do you define viability? Do they need to be able to get a job? Kids that aren't viable.
Yeah, lots of adults aren't viable if that's your definition. So, no, I think 24 weeks, that's the legal limit, and that's what I would say is I'm comfortable with.
My question also is for Heather. As part of your presentation, you were talking about how the different religious groups have different opinions and recommendations in cases of abortion. But I believe Emily's point was that it wasn't a particular religious view one way or the other, but that actually science has proven, and it really is not any kind of debate, like she said. It is a fact that after fertilization you have a distinct human being. So I don't see how appealing to, you know, the multicultural aspect of America has anything to do with what her point is, which is that it is a separate life at fertilization. So why is the right to life not attached to the person at that moment?
So, you know, the other day I was having a discussion with a rabbi who feels that these types of bans and the definition, legally defining a life as beginning at fertilization, and therefore all of the rights of a fully born human being given to that embryo violates her religious freedom, because in her faith, the woman always comes first. And what you're basically saying is that then the woman, as soon as there's a fertilized egg, the woman loses her rights to that. And I think it comes down to a legal definition, not so much your personal views or your views on science. I think that is also questionable, and the definition you're using is fairly broad, because, you know, like I say, yeah, that is reproduction, and that is a potential, but that's not necessarily a living, breathing, walking, crying, sleeping, eating human. That's different.
Well, again, I think the first thing that you said in response to my question was about a rabbi, but nothing in her presentation had anything to do with any religion. It is scientific fact that it is a person, that it is a separate, genetically different human being at the moment of fertilization, regardless of what anyone personally thinks. You know, I can say, well, 1 + 1 is 4, but it just isn't, because math has laws and science has laws, and scientifically it is a fact that it is a person, regardless of how you personally feel about that particular scientific fact. It just is, because, you know, people thought the world was flat for a long, long time, and that just is not the case.
I just respectfully disagree. Thank you.
Thanks.
And everyone can ask one question and then one follow-up, and that's how we're going to do it. Please be civil. Again. And you'll have to make your way up here because we don't have wireless mics, so we're kind of tethered to this region.
My question is for you.
What's your name?
Oh, my name's Dom, by the way. Pardon me. My question, though, is in particular, what is Texas Right to Life? Is their position on, yes, of course, as Ms. Busby was pointing out, it means more to be pro-life than just simply an opposition to abortion. So, what kind of comprehensive plan would there be in place?
Speaking in the mic.
What kind of comprehensive plan would there be in place if, say, abortion was made illegal as they would like to have? Would there be some sort of a social structure in place? Something a bit more than just simply charitable donations, but perhaps more of a sort of a governmental policy in place that would support women in difficult positions throughout the course of it, help them cure the ills that sort of create abortion to be rather wild options.
Well, I definitely think that Texas Right to Life is all about the sanctity of the unborn, the sanctity of human life from conception to natural death. And so if abortion was illegal, we would be in the business of helping, there's still unplanned pregnancies, so we would be in the business of helping girls, with young women who need help, get through unplanned pregnancies and help them with those underlying reasons. And so, we exist to help women in those needs. So I think, does that answer your question?
Not exactly. Are you still, is the plan simply still to rely on charitable organizations and volunteer abilities, or is it more of supporting and lobbying for comprehensive governmental policy that would be in support of this?
Well, I think that question depends on political persuasions. How much government involvement do you want in these social issues? I think that I couldn't speak for everyone. Personally, I would probably advocate for more the charitable aspect of helping these young girls and private citizens, helping other private citizens. But I have no idea. I don't speak for all of us personal political persuasions of all of our employees. So.
Thank you.
My question is for Ms. Cavanaugh. And I am personally pro-life. I believe it should be illegal to have an abortion.
What's your name?
Chris Busby. No. But one thing I've not seen on the pro-life side very often is secular arguments, like what you've made tonight, based on science, logic, reasoning. Most arguments I've seen made in favor of abortion being illegal are based on religious views or religious beliefs. Would you care to address that?
I think it's a matter of what the media picks up on. I have been involved in the Right to Life movement since I was, 18, I guess, and it's not a very long time, but even in my short span of time, I have come across these logic, reasoned arguments against abortion and against the legality of abortion. And then it's so infuriating when I read news reports and editorials about, like what you said, it's casting it clearly and purely as a religious issue, as if no other issues exist or other arguments exist for our position. And I think it's just, they're not being heard. They're not being heard.
And the follow-up question, which I guess both of you could address if you want, is there a role for religion in this debate?
Yeah, there's a role for religion in the debate. Where do we all start out at some point with our faith or lack of belief in something else? And I think it's, we can clearly, if I was talking to a group of purely Methodists, I would be talking about how our tithing shouldn't be going to support the National Abortion Federation because it goes against the doctrine of John Wesley, but I'm not. So I think there's religion that is in the debate just because that's something that is in our society.
If you'd like.
Sure. I think really this is a matter of conscience. And so, of course, religion plays a role in that because it affects the decisions that they make according to their faith and their conscience. And that should be left up to the individual. And I do think that there have been some religious institutions who have driven a lot of the drive to make abortion illegal.
Howdy. Howdy. My name's Jen. I am a medical student at A&M. And thank you. And I have a question for you, Ms. Busby. You've been talking a lot about the rights of the woman versus the rights of the embryo or the child. And I would just like to pose a question to you. Do you think that the right to a woman's privacy is a higher right than another person's life, that being the embryo?
The right to make a private medical decision is above that. I mean, we're not talking about like going on and killing, this guy over here. We're talking about, what's going on in your own body. That I think there's a difference there. That a woman's right should not become subservient to the embryo. And I think among the medical community, just the other day I was talking with a physician who was working in an obstetric ward prior to 1973, and he teared up when he talked about having to do a hysterectomy on a 19-year-old girl who had a botched illegal abortion. And so, from a medical perspective, I think that we need to look at and listen to the stories of those who actually saw what happens when we don't have access to safe procedures.
Okay, I'll go. My question is for Miss Emily Cavanaugh. My name is Matthew Bernstein, and I was looking at your Right to Life website today for the first time, and one of the things that I noticed was that one of the blogs on there says that we should make all abortion illegal because children, and that's the word that you use, children when they grow up, they pay taxes. So the taxes that we bring in from every birth is $255,000 as opposed to what it cost us, $11,000 for an abortion. I've never had one, so I wouldn't know. My question is, from a liberty perspective, how can you look at this issue from the idea that every live birth that Texas has, that is taxpayer dollars, and the value of the child is in those taxpayer dollars?
I think I recall the article that you're referencing on our website. The article isn't talking about putting a value on human life. It's just talking about when we take away all the lives that have been lost to abortion, a lot of the arguments for legalizing abortion were less crime, that it was going to cost the state less money if there's less children that the state money has to go towards. And so that what that article was pointing out was what has 40 years since Roe cost us is an economic reality. But I think it might be unfair to say that that's the only value that you can just put a monetary value on a child's life, and that's it. I think it was just talking more about, yes, the economic impact, but not saying that's the only reason we should not have abortion.
Okay, I hate more than anything speaking in groups.
Turn the mic on.
I'm so sorry. See, I don't even know how to turn this thing on. Am I loud enough without it? My question is someone that is pro-life. At what point in time does the mother's life become more important than the fetus?
in speaking of instances of an ectopic pregnancy or instances of high blood pressure, or even if the mom's not exhibiting at that moments of high blood pressure where her life is in danger, where she could stroke out, where she could leave her other children as orphans. But she has such a history of preeclampsia. When does a woman's life become more important than the child that may or may not even be able to get to term?
Okay. I'm done. That question really definitely raises some very deep and sociological implications. It becomes an issue of intent. When you are treating the woman for her life, if you are treating with the intent as a physician, and I'm probably butchering the term, but if you are treating the woman with the intent to save her life, with the intent to fix the preeclamp, try to do whatever that is needed to make the woman well again, but you're not going in with the intent to kill the unborn child.
But sometimes you have to kill the unborn child to fix the ectopic pregnancy or to fix the preeclampsia.
At that point, I think his Mr. Busby's question about where religion comes into the debate is a good place here, because there are, my personal religion talks about the intent of if that's a byproduct of what happens to the mother, and when trying and explaining it very badly. Instead of, you're trying to fix the problem with the mother, and if that happens, then
with what are you referring to as if that happens? If that happens, the child dies or the fetus dies. If that happens, the mother dies. What is that?
If the unborn child dies in the process of trying with the intent to try to save both lives, but one doesn't make it, I think that the intent makes a world of difference in how we cast those situations.
Hi, David Grapple again speaking. So I think my question is going to be for the both of you, if that's okay. I'll forego my follow-up. It's kind of a follow-up on Sarah's question. On the subject of common ground, what are your opinions in terms of on contraception? Because I think you can both agree that an unwanted pregnancy and an abortion is a tragic event that I don't think anyone here wants to see that ever happen. And we want to reduce those as much as possible in our society. We don't want situations where families and women are going through these kinds of difficult situations. So I would like to see if there's any common ground in terms of legislation and in terms of between your two groups working on issues of contraception for women.
I think it just depends. The red flag for me is defining life